Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Mofokba Israel Adeboye. I'm an employability specialist with IFC's employability program, Vitae. I'll be your moderator, and our session today is all about artificial intelligence, where to start and how to scale. Now, AI is transforming how we live, learn, and work. But the flood of information and the pace of change can really be overwhelming. Many of our clients are asking us, where do we even begin? And for those who have started, they're asking us, are we on the right track? This webinar aims to cut through that noise. We may not answer every question, but we do aim to share practical step-by-step strategies and real-world use cases to help you take action with clarity and confidence. On this note, I am excited to introduce my panel speakers here. Tania Romero, she's a professor, and she's also the lead of Data Analytics, AI, and Innovation Project at IE University. Ian Odebode is an entrepreneur. He's a founder of Zetas and Walker. He's an academic researcher with a PhD in deep learning. Tania and Ian, welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent. Now, before we dive in, let's just reflect on the data. So AI in education is growing rapidly. The sector is projected to hit about $16 billion by 2027. Now, this is an estimate of about 40% annual growth, which is a lot. Despite this growth, the skills gap is widening. And according to the World Economic Forum, 44% of workers' core skills would change in the next 2 years, 2027. So how are higher education institutions responding to this? An EDUCAUSE report surveyed that and found that over 60% of universities are piloting AI tools, but many of them still struggle with faculty readiness. In fact, the data suggests that only 28% of faculty actually feel confident using AI in the classroom. And that's just only a piece of the problem. So how do we move forward? Today's session, we will be discussing how we can align our AI with institutional strategy, how we can consider setting up the right data, and how we can leverage existing resources, and so much more. So let's get started. I'm going to start with Tania. So Tania, how do you see universities using AI today? And if I just rephrase that, it really is it common to see universities having AI as part of the institutional strategy?
I truly believe that it should be part of the institutional strategy. However, based on some of the surveys that I have seen, most of the institutions are actually more reactive to the implementation of AI. So a lot of these universities are concerned about the rise of the students using AI in their courses. They know that the students are actually a step ahead from faculty, staff, or the rest of the institution. Also, universities are concerned about the risk of the inappropriate use of these technologies, right? Like cheating, for example. So students are using these tools not only for learning purposes, but also to discover how they can cheat. And universities are falling behind these technologies. And that's why, in general, I think universities are just trying to react to it and trying to speed up the process of implementing all these technologies. The reality is that AI is here to stay. It's evolving extremely fast. So universities should be asking themselves, like, how is going to impact us, right? Or how is already impacting us? How do we make sure that it's part of our curriculum? How do we have the policies in place in terms of governance, privacy, etc.? And also how AI aligns to the overall strategy of the institution, not only for educational purposes, but also for administrative tasks and overall the strategy of the entire organization.
And if I had to summarize that, would I be right in saying that a lot of universities tend to be more reactive than strategic?
Yes, that's what I'm seeing right now. And of course, that will speed up the process because that will help them to actually build a strategy at a certain point, right? But right now, I think they're more reacting to it. And then in the medium long term, that's when it start integrating part of all of this as part of the institutional strategy.
And what is interesting about that as well, we did have a pre-registration poll, and a lot of our, almost about over 80% of our participants today responded to that poll. And we asked the question, what's your institution's current approach to artificial intelligence? And out of 4 options, actively implementing AI projects, exploring AI, but no clear strategy, we found that almost 50% said they're actually exploring artificial intelligence in the institution, but they don't actually have any clear strategy, while only 38% did say that they were actively trying to implement AI, and about 12% said they were curious, but not really sure where to start. So you find that a large range of people really are trying. We've moved from not doing anything at all to actually making the move, but it's still all about aligning with strategy and really knowing the right steps to take. So, I mean, on that note, because it just aligns with what you're saying, Tania, I am going to go to Iyanu here. When we consider the adoption of AI, what do you think, or what would you say are the top 3 priorities that higher education institutions, should take when developing an AI strategy roadmap? What should they prioritize? What areas?
Yeah. So I would give 4, and then we would focus on the 3. And so
Okay.
one is, we need to be able to enhance teaching and learning. And what we found, is that there's still a lot of traditional teaching approaches and methodologies where you have, 100 or 200 people in class, and everybody learns sort of differently. And so we want to bring in AI to actually help, maybe in the areas like personalized learning. That's one area that we could see AI really, really help us, where we could move towards active learning and things of that nature. So that's one, AI to enhance teaching and learning, teaching for helping the professors, and learning for helping the students. 2, I would say improve the administrative and operations line of educational business. I think there are a lot of systems that are still quite antiquated and old and needs to change. And so, there are a lot of automation systems coming up now that can actually help to do that. But I think that will be probably further along the road. The 3rd is empowering research and innovation. Sam Altman, the CEO of ChatGPT, was saying that about 2 or 3 days ago, we need to put in a lot more effort into creating even AI tools that would actually help research. There's still a lot of research areas that's still far behind, like drug discovery and things of that nature. Some of those areas are still far behind. And then enhancing the student experience, success, and career readiness. A lot of students want to come to school, but they also want to get a job. How do we actually use AI to empower students to be able to get those opportunities? So the 3 core areas that I believe institutions should be focusing on is enhancing teaching and learning, empowering research and innovation, and then enhancing the student experience.
Thank you, Yanu. So just to, because you did expand on those things, it's a core of any higher education institution. We need to think about teaching and learning, very core. We need to think about research and innovation. Really, that's part of positioning for the future. Then obviously, being the key stakeholder, enhancing the student experience doesn't undermine the fact that the administrative and operational pipeline, when we're talking about cost efficiencies, are also just as important. So those are 4 key areas that universities can really adopt AI from what you're saying. And taking it on from there, Tania, I just wanted to come to you. So we have these 4 areas. Some have started in some have, maybe we have universities that have started the journey in 1 or 2 of these areas, while maybe some haven't started in any, and maybe some have little bits in every one of these areas. I want to take a step back to still be strategic and ask the question, what are the key steps? So as a university leader, what are the key steps that I can take to deliver on any of these AI programs? And I'm thinking design thinking framework here. Whether I choose teaching and learning or I choose to enhance student experience, are there steps that I can take in terms of when I want to program or create a roadmap for implementing AI here? Tania?
Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the first questions is actually what am I trying to accomplish by implementing AI? Right?
Mm.
Because I think a lot of people is thinking, oh, everyone is talking about AI, everyone is doing it. I just have to do whatever it comes first, right? But without really taking a step back and saying, okay, what am I trying to accomplish by implementing AI? Is this goal that I'm trying to achieve aligned with my institutional strategy, right? What kind of benefits are we looking for to actually have an impact in the institution and being able to measure them? We're talking about only generative AI or actually AI in general, right? Because also that's another very important thing. Everyone is thinking about that generative AI is only ChatGPT. No, it's much more than that, right? So what am I trying to achieve? So with that, you're going to be able to align your goals with institutional strategy. So I think that's one of the first steps. Then, do you have the right data ecosystem? Are you prepared for that? It's really important that we understand that all AI projects are fed with data, right? There's no AI without data. Therefore, it's really, really important to have a very strong data ecosystem that will support all your projects, right? And it doesn't matter what kind of project you're going to be doing in terms of AI, you really need to have this strong foundation. Otherwise, it's going to be very challenging to develop these projects. Then the third point I will say, are you able to map and leverage existing capabilities, right? Do you have the resources to develop these AI projects? Do you have to upskill and reskill your employees? Or do you need to hire new talent, right? Also in terms of capacity, right? Do you have actually the infrastructure and do you have the capacity to do it right now in terms of policies, in terms of ethics? Do you need to do new investments? Do you need to buy licenses if you're actually going to purchase like AI tools? Those kind of things that you have to think, do you have all that already in place? And then, of course, engage your stakeholders and share that they will need to have this vision and share it with you, right? Do you have the support from them, from the key stakeholders to become data-driven and really implementing their projects under a corporate strategy? And considering all these areas, no, that Ianu was saying, like in teaching and learning, because maybe there's more interest in teaching and learning than in the administrative operations, but there's benefit in all areas, right? Or research is behind and they want to catch up. And so do we share this vision in all these different core areas where we need to implement this kind of projects? So I think these are like some ideas of some of the steps that they can take. But it's really important that you start asking yourself, what do I'm trying to achieve? And is this aligned with my overall strategy?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tania. And just to reframe, because there was so much in there. I know we're trying to get through a lot and just share a lot in a short time. But if I were to say, I will say in any of the core areas that Iano had mentioned, if we were just to say, okay, we want to go with any of these core areas, there are 5 steps that we should have at the back of our mind and really frame our program or our roadmap around this. And that's really aligning the goal itself with institutional strategy, which was what we started off with. Then we assess and prepare our data ecosystem, very important. We map and leverage where we now versus where we need to go, existing capabilities versus planned capabilities. So we start to map that as well. So we know what we need to get on board. And in this process, we need to engage stakeholders, make sure whatever that vision is, we're constantly sharing it. And we need to have an investment in capacity and building responsibly. I'm going to ask you, Tania, just share with us in a bit more detail, how to build the right data infrastructure, because it is critical to AI success. And regardless of where universities are, just share with us how they can start thinking about tackling this challenge.
And I don't think it's only key for AI, it's key for decision making. In general, like any decision making that an organization has to make, right? And that's why I think Iano and I agree that data is one of the biggest challenges, because if we actually look at the responses, if we think about faculty training and learning, even if they're trained, they don't have the right data.
Exactly.
How they're going to be able to implement a lot of these things, right? So for me, like decision making is key on any organization. And of course, AI can support us on this journey. But for that, we really need to have like these strong roots, right, to build this. And let me use an analogy for this, and it's going to be a tree, and let me share my screen. So I think about like these roots as the roots of a tree, right? And this is like your foundation in terms of the data ecosystem that you need, right? Like, do you have the infrastructure in terms of data governance to manage all this data, right? Do you have the right policies in place so everyone knows which are the rules that we need to follow, right? Do you have the right data architecture where you're going to be storing all this data? Or do you have like silos of data everywhere when everyone has their own spreadsheet with their own numbers or like student enrollments, right? Or are all your data integrated into your systems, maybe in a data lake, right? Then in terms of standardization, right? We really need to have one single source of truth. Otherwise, it's very difficult for reporting and of course for decision making if we have like different like data sets everywhere, right? So we need to standardize all that. In terms of data processes, right? Do we have the right processes in place to ensure that we're following the right steps to actually retrieve this data for your business purposes? And also, of course, the quality of your data, right? Are you able to clean this data in order to make it reliable and have like a strong quality? So once you have actually these roots, that's the way that will allow you to actually build data and AI projects. And with that, we can see actually the top of the tree, right? And this is where we actually can see, we're talking about maybe reporting, just basic reporting and dashboards. So we can talk about gaining insights from all these different projects so you can have like take the decisions on your business. We can talk about predictive models. And let me give you just some examples of the things that we can do, right? For example, in terms of students' success and retention, right? A predictive model can actually help us to identify, for example, the risk of dropping out, right?
Yes.
And we will need to analyze data related maybe with their attendance, with their academic performance, with their engagement, even with payments, right? Are we collecting this kind of data right now? How do we collecting it? Is it good data or not? But all this is going to help us to actually build a model of AI through machine learning. So we're not talking about generative AI. And this can help us to identify those potential dropouts, right? And of course, it can also help us in terms of enrollments and admissions. We can forecast enrollment trends, or we can optimize financial aid allocation or personalization. Now, in terms of, for example, curriculum planning or program optimization, right? AI can help us to analyze like the labor market data and see if we're offering the programs that actually are needed based on what the labor market is demanding. And also in terms of in operations, right? We all are looking for efficiencies. We need operational efficiencies, and this can help us to streamline these operations like scheduling resource allocation or facilities management or budgeting, right? So data-driven decision-making with AI can help us to implement all these different areas within the institutions, right? But we really need to have these strong roots. And also in terms of resources, right? If you are a university that are just starting, my advice is to have a centralized team, right? For example, the university that I work for, we have a data office that is within the IT department, and we are responsible from all these areas, right? From governance to architecture to business intelligence, analytics, AI. But it's one single team, and then we provide support and services to the rest of the organization, right? But of course, it depends on the maturity of the organization. Because if you're mature enough, you can also have already experts on the business who can also do their own work, right? But if you're just starting, having like decentralized is going to be very difficult to find ownership and accountability and how the data is going to be collected, stored, managed, clean, everything, right? So my suggestion is like as a starting point to have like a centralized team.
Thank you so much, Tania. That again, with AI, we always find there's so much to unpack. And this is why we're taking this approach to having this discussion. It doesn't change the fact that there is a lot to go through, but there are systems and ways which we can start to think about it to make it more manageable. And I'm going to take a step back again and go back to the 4 core areas that Iana mentioned earlier. When we think about the university as a whole, so we think about research and innovation, we think about the student experience, we think about teaching and learning, we think about the administration and the operational pipeline as well. And we're thinking about all those areas and how we can approach it. Either of those areas, we need to think through what data, what's the input system. And this is very powerful. So we're going to, because we can't cover everything, I just want us to be able to just think through and integrate one into one of those examples. And I'll take my liberties here and say teaching and learning, because just looking at the chat as well, a lot of people are talking about teaching and learning, pedagogy, as an area that excites them the most. So let's maybe use a little time we have to kind of just explore this area a little bit more. And I'll come to you, Iyanu. We had said earlier as well that there's hesitancy in using AI for teaching and learning. I think both you and Tania alluded to this. As an expert that advises higher education clients, what educational challenges can AI help solve in teaching and learning? Just to start this conversation around teaching and learning. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. So if you think about it, I'll take a particular course. Let's just take biology, for example. Today, when you teach biology, I had a really interesting experience personally with biology because you had to read a whole lot of stuff. I was really good at math. Biology, you kind of just have to keep reading and all that kind of stuff. So imagine if you could create a scenario-based learning where, a user comes into, and it could be through a Google Glass. It doesn't have to, it could be Oculus, or it could even be Web3 experience online, comes into an environment and they're able to basically see the human body, for example, and able to click on something in this environment, and it teaches them what that's about. Now, it's enough for it to teach them what that's about, but then they could also engage with it. They could say, okay, but why does it do this? And why does it do that? And then you start seeing generative AI come into play there, where you then sort of communicating with the system and things of that nature. That's one piece. From a management standpoint, there's this huge problem now, which is absenteeism, right? People don't show up at classes. People don't. How do we start creating systems that actually motivate people to, come to classes? And then we just, like Tania was saying, it's not just about generative AI. Then we put some gamification there. We put some immersive learning, pieces in there, but also bake it into some predictive models where you're able to tell, like, is the student actually learning, or should we make some changes? And this is where data comes into the picture, because most times we all jump to generative AI, but we don't have that baked in foundation to be able to actually keep things growing. And so immersive learning becomes a very, very key thing. Everything is also moving towards augmented learning, where you can actually see physical experience, but also virtual experience at the same time. There's a cost to that. And that's the reason why I was saying Web3 and other ideas around using the web to be able to still create that similar experience becomes really, really critical.
Those are very interesting examples, and I'm sure even relatable as well, because what we've talked about that is teaching on one side and then the learning on the other side as well. And I will now come to you, Tania. Iyanu has described potentially how some of those problems, there are a host of them, but some of those problems, that we encounter, and how we can use AI to respond to those problems. I say it's, how do we build capacity?
So I think as higher education institutions, we have to practice what we preach.
True.
Therefore, AI literacy is an amazing opportunity, right? To support and to develop our faculty members and staff. And I found this amazing framework from the Digital Education Council, This framework provides the essential knowledge and skills needed to understand and interact critically in order to evaluate the AI technologies. And I think because the way I like it is because the way it is actually framed, it takes you from the basics, right? So the first one is actually to understand AI and data. So what I was saying before, understanding these roots of these three, right? Do we have them? What are we missing in order to actually develop them? And once we understand this will help us to understand how does AI work, right? And how is fed. Secondly, is critical thinking and judgment, right? How do I evaluate the output of AI, right? We don't want students or faculty or ourselves actually just copy pasting whatever output we have. We have to develop critical thinking, and that's where pedagogy has to change a lot, right? We have to learn how to teach differently now. Right? Because before it was an essay where people, students have to actually think about what they were going to write, and now it's ChatGPT writing those essays, right? So how do we going to evaluate them and make sure that what they are putting in that paper, they're able to defend it, and they're able to have a critical thinking in terms of what they are sharing, right? Then is the third dimension of this framework is ethical and responsible use, right? How do I ensure that AI is used ethically and responsibly, right? And this is a really, really important thing. And it has to be, for me, a mandate for developers, right? They have to develop products that are ethical and making sure that the responsible use is going to be on benefit of human beings, right? Which takes me to the fourth dimension, that is actually human centricity, emotional intelligence, and creativity, right? How do we ensure that the humans remain at the core of all these tools? And also the projects that we're developing, right? As Iana was saying, is if I'm thinking about the biology class, right? And if I'm if my learning way, the best way for me to learn is actually visual instead of reading, how do I can use this technology to make me learn faster so I can actually really grab all this information and really learn, right? Instead of just reading and reading and reading, and maybe I just retain 5% of what I'm reading, right? So, and the last dimension is actually domain expertise, right? How do I apply AI to a specific context, right? So that's why I like this framework, because it covers basically the general literacy of AI. And then the last part is actually, okay, now that I understand how it works, how do I apply it to the specific context that I want?
Absolutely. And I think, thank you, Tania, because I think what I like most about what you said is because the DEA resource itself, it kind of gives you almost a framework with which you can really think about the universe of teaching and learning and how to use AI in teaching and learning, even areas that we don't even think about normally. And that becomes almost like a guide that you can use to build a program, training program for facilitators. It becomes a guide as well to guide some of our strategy, and just check ourselves. We don't have to do everything at the same time, but it's then useful to have those frameworks and guide, educators really going beyond thinking about things like ChatGPT and just thinking about it in the context of, oh, they're going to cheat. But, start to think beyond that, because these are part of where the hesitancy is coming from, to how can we actually use this to make them think more critically?
Well, it's exactly what we were saying at the beginning of this question, right? If faculty doesn't understand how this works, how you're going to be creative enough to think how to make things different, right? You have been teaching the same way for many, many years, and now this comes to disrupt the way you have been teaching. Well, I need to understand how it works, right? I have to have a hands-on experience and start experimenting with not only ChatGPT, but with many other tools. So I can think, oh, okay, maybe now the way I'm going to be teaching this class is going to be this way, right? Or how I can support myself in terms of grading, for example, right? Like I'm using AI so I can benefit in terms of efficiencies in the process of that it takes me to manually grade a lot of my students. And now I can make that more efficient with AI. And so I have more quality time for the class, for developing content for the class, for thinking how I'm going to be teaching this course. So, but for me, it's really, really important they learn how AI works and they experiment also, like with a very hands-on experience.
So your message to colleagues will be, let's get over our fears and make it an ally as opposed to the enemy.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid of it. Like for me, AI is just augmenting our capacities and skills, right?
Absolutely.
So if you're afraid, you're just staying behind because this is just going to continue evolving like extremely fast.
Sure. And I'm going to come to Iano as well on the same question in terms of really how you're, from the business perspective, because I know you also engage from a business perspective, how do you think capacity can be built?
I think that ultimately there needs to be a little bit of investment in training as well. That way, so you could basically be really great at something, and the people that surround you are not, as great at it. And for that reason, there's some type of slowness in the adoption of that. So one practice that we've imbibed as a company is to invest a lot in training and ensuring that we are measuring the outcome we have with AI versus those that without AI, and motivating internally people to continue to enhance and build their skill, like Tania was saying earlier, not just in GPT, but also in a variety of tools that actually can help us optimize. So I think one is you have to kind of map out what you're trying to accomplish. Tania has really stressed and doubled down on it at the beginning. What exactly are you trying? What's your vision? What's your goal? And once you understand that, you can start seeing how all of that ties into, your entire operation. And then you start saying, okay, what's the biggest pain point that I have within my organization? And you probably want to start there. And when you go start there, you might start with the roughest. Then you have to go back to, okay, what data can we gather around that? Who do I have within my team to do that? If you've not invested in training, it's going to be a little hard for you to be able to accomplish that.
To be able to do that. And I think sometimes I feel a lot of colleagues at higher education institutions feel it's very overwhelming to have to deal with this along with everything else. Do I have to do all this by myself? Yes, I'm willing to learn, but do I have to do this? And in that context, Iano, are there, I think the question I'm posing is in two legs. Are there maybe tools that can be leveraged by university? Because what we don't want to do is reinvent the wheel. So just like the DEA framework that can help us think through everything we should be thinking about and probably help us build a training plan. It'll be nice to know if there are also other tools out there that we can just go explore, leverage, and also maybe communities that we can also connect to kind of help us where we don't have to start all the work all over again because people are already on this journey.
Yes, I agree 100%. So with regards to data, depending on what it is that you're trying to solve, Kaggle is a good platform. Kaggle has kaggle.com, that's Kaggle. And by the way, we'll be sharing this document with everybody as well. So there's also data science for beginners. Microsoft has a community hub where everyone can participate, ask questions. There's fast.ai forum where you can actually learn a little bit about the tools, what they do. There's OpenAI community as well. And so there are communities where you can go. Outside of that, there are some really, really critical tools that you can actually begin to engage right now. I know everybody's quite familiar with GPT, but there's Motion. Motion is like an immersive learning experience tool, where you can actually start to play around what that might look like for your university. There's Khan Academy and Kamingo, which is a personalized version of Khan Academy.
Mhm.
So there's a little bit of learning curve there, but as soon as you start to play around with it, you sort of get familiar with it. There's Ed Puzzle, where you can actually basically while doing your class share things with
Mhm.
your interactive things with your students. They answer questions, ways that you can actually, while teaching, you put out a poll, and then you have AI essentially help analyze the poll to figure out, are my students actually learning, or is this not really helping?
Again, we're going to have a list. It's not exhaustive, but we will
Yeah.
share a list of different things we can explore. We also have a D4 TEP program, which is for digital transformation, and we also cover AI, and we do have a community, so you can ask your questions, you can engage with those who are on that journey as well. So there are communities out there, and there are resources out there to use. So I think the biggest message here is do not be overwhelmed, there's things there to use. And as we wrap up, do you have concrete examples, that maybe just excite you, that you would like to share with participants today on universities that have begun to integrate AI into their teaching and learning? I like to hear success stories, especially where there's been hesitancy about it. Taking that bold step. Do you have any example you'd like to share? And I'll start with Tania.
I think like the most common use case right now, it's more like chatbots, AI tutors, AI feedback, because they can really help both faculty and students on their learning process, right? Like for example, an AI tutor, like if you are a professor and you're trying to support your students, like you're a human being that you have to sleep, right? And maybe your students are studying at 2, 3 a.m. and you're gonna be able to answer their questions, right? But if you develop an AI tutor for your course, they can be there 24/7 and they can answer like their questions. And it's very important that they have to be developed in a very with a Socratic method, right? Meaning that I'm not gonna give you the answer that you're expecting. I'm gonna make you think so you can reflect on this and you can find your own answer, right? So the student keeps learning, and in a way the tutor is also teaching them. But I say like these are the most common examples. And of course, this has to be considered in terms of, okay, in terms of the policies that you're gonna have in place when they use these kind of tools, the honor codes, the ethical part, of course, the training for the faculty. But in general, I think the benefits are that they are, there's like a personalized learning at scale, also reducing the faculty workload on repetitive tasks. Usually a lot of the questions from students are the same, right? So you keep answering the same question. You can have data-driven insights, right, from what the students are asking. And there's more student engagement as well, right? Because they're engaging with this tutor and they have more autonomy in the way they're learning. So those are some of the examples that I have seen in some of the use cases in different universities and also in the university that I work for.
Thank you, Tania. Thank you, Tania. Is there any you'd like to share, Yana, before we go to questions?
Yeah, so the biggest example, which I want everybody to take a look at when you do have the chance, is the 2-hour learning. 2-hour learning is started off, I don't know, maybe a couple years, but their focus really is on essentially teaching students application while AI teaches students the actual course itself. And so 2-hour learning, basically you engage, the tools, and they've seen about 97%, like good performance from the students when they take their SATs and things of that nature in the school, because now they can actually focus a lot more on helping these students solve hard problems. There is My Academy, which is my kids use it, and basically you could engage them in like games and things of that nature that actually help to better improve, their ability to grasp the concept. And it's been extremely helpful.
I think if I had to summarize, I think as educators, when we think teaching and learning, we just really have to be really agile, flexible, adaptive, in everything we do. Creative. I think it's going to put a demand if we're not being creative, and really bold, not afraid, to even give our students projects. I was saying, use AI. Let's see what you can do with that. Let them use AI and then push them to think critically in the classroom. So I am going to go to questions now. Do you think universities should also teach students additional skills so they can make meaning out of responses that AI gives?
There was a law that is being passed right now in the US that is going to enforce actually AI literacy across the board. So I think that is really, really important because there are people that have the skill. There are people that really don't have, the skill. You don't necessarily need to go into the deep learning and in-depth AI stuff. It's really teaching them how to understand, how to, make the best use of the tools that exist. There are a lot of courses now on prompt engineering for people who don't necessarily need to go, deep down. So I think, yes, I think that should be encouraged, that should be pushed. And if you're able to do that, that goes, along the lines of the training I was referring to earlier. If you're able to push that, then you're able to actually get more return on, I would say it's return on investment, but also too is return on purpose. You're able to get return on investment, but you're also actually able to get return on purpose.
And if I would like to add something, if you look at the report from the World Economic Forum of the future of work for 2030, actually the skills that are going to be demanded are not only AI skills, it's also the human side of it, right? And so critical thinking, creativity, all those questions, because for me, it's very important that we learn how these things work.
Yes.
But then these robots or these tools are going to be performing that kind of job. But we as human beings, the way they were going to differentiate us from them is what actually is our human skills. And for that, we need to keep learning about them.
And I'll stay with you, Tania. The next question is, before I go to the next question, the first question was from Timothy, and he's in Ghana. And even though Yana spoke to the laws being in US, I think what we should take away from it is we need to be proactive. So even if it's not mandated, the fact we're thinking about it and going ahead of it is very, very important. So Raphael is asking, institutions are developing policies to regulate the use of AI by students, while learners feel the policies are limiting them. So how do institutions strike the balance between the use, strategy, and issues with UI? For example, bias, AI bias.
I think there are too many different ways to answer that question because it covers too many topics, right? But I think first, that's why it's so important that you have your own policy. And the own policy doesn't mean that it has to be one size fits all. It's again, what is the goal of your course? Right? What are you trying to achieve with that course? What is the learning? What are the learning objectives? And based on that is how does the AI policy applies to that? Are they going to be able to freely use AI, whatever tool they have? Only specific ones? Nothing at all, right? So, because again, is what are you trying to teach to them?
True. And because you mentioned the fact that that could have been answered in multiple ways, I am going to encourage everyone to really reach out to D4TEP team. The community always helps because the question keeps evolving as well. So I'm going to go to the next question. It says, where can I find some practical tools or guide to help my team create governing documents and guidelines to follow around establishing and adopting digital transformation throughout the university?
Well, D4TEP is actually a good way.
Collab.
No, honestly, I think it's a good way. But also, I think again depends a lot on the maturity of
Mm.
of the university, right?
Mm.
Ask ChatGPT, because honestly, when we develop our first policy, we have to look a lot online to see what I was out there, what other universities have published, and then based on that compare and make a very honest evaluation, like self-analysis, to see where we are standing here, right? So we are not gonna be creating a policy that is super restrictive or that considers things that we don't even have implemented, right? So you have to maybe use like different examples from different policies that could be published, and then based on that, make your own self-analysis. And there are frameworks for actually doing like a self-assessment. And with that, you can have an idea of where you stand, and based on that, develop your own policy, right? But it's not going to be a copy paste. It has to be literally framed to your own
Yes.
institution and where you are right now, and then of course where you want to be in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Tania. And the next question, Ianu, are there small grant opportunities for AI training and packages for universities and faculty that can be leveraged?
It really depends on what part of the world you're living in, but I think it's aigrants.org, a company called Accelerate Africa and Future Africa. So if you're looking to do things in the African space, there's lots of funding for that, if depending on what it is that you're looking to do. But Future Africa and Accelerate Africa.
I think maybe what we can do as well is if we have some of those links or contact, we can include it in the post-webinar share as well. And I'm going to take the very, very last question, and I think we only have about 30 seconds or so, just a minute to respond to it. And it is, would you recommend buy or build, Tania? Buy or build AI tutors for institutions?
Again, it all depends, right? And sorry to be not having like a straightforward answer. But depends on what you already have in place, right? And how you're gonna train these tutors, right? Do you have already all, for example, all your data collected in terms of your courses or your syllabus or whatever, like, or do you have actually the resources? Imagine you don't have even a team to actually build this. Of course, you have to buy a tool, right? And then based on your budget, like what kind of tool, right? Like there are so many questions that I think it depends on your own institution, and also the pace, and like you want it like for yesterday, or do you have time actually to develop it and do iterations? And so it all depends. I don't know, Yano, if you want to add something, but for me, it's
that's basically what I was gonna say.
Okay, so we are in agreement. And on that note, thank you everyone for joining today's session. A very big thank you to our speakers, Tania and Ianu. You've been awesome. Thank you for sharing your insights, very practical insights with such clarity. A lot of the resources that has been mentioned will be shared. This is just one step in a broader conversation about AI readiness and employability.